That's a
Okay, fine. Good.
oh, it's the first time I've seen that. I have to press continue then. Oh, I think we're open, are we?
We might be.
Yes, I think we are open. So it's 4 o'clock. Yes, there we go.
There we
Paul
go.
has
We're
opened
open.
it up. So I will say good afternoon to everybody. We will give it a couple of minutes for the system to allow everybody to access. But just as a general welcome to everybody as you come on. Welcome to making UK housing stock low carbon. There we go. There's a title and a half. And I'll mention this a couple of times as we go through the course of today. There will be some poll questions as you're joining, which will be asked for the course of the conversation. Take part in that, please. There's an ability for Q&A. So there's two different elements here. There's a general chat button you'll know on the Zoom and a Q&A. If you've got questions for the panel as we move forward, please try and put them on the Q&A. But we will be reviewing both the Q&A and the chat as we go. So I'd just like to sort of say welcome. Welcome to everyone that's joining us, and more, I suppose, more relevant, welcome to our panelists, and thank you. So to introduce you all, we have John Bagley from Countrywide Surveyors. Forgive me, guys, but I won't give you titles. Adrian McDermott from Barratt's. We've got Kieran Walker from the Home Builders Federation. And we've got Clive Sandon from Leeds Building Society. And forgive me, Kieran, first of all, but when did we change it from house builders to home builders? Am I completely off the pace? Was that very recent?
No, that was some time ago. I think it was in the late 90s, actually. But
late 90s,
don't feel bad about it.
I'm just showing you how old and how long I've been in this industry. Anyway, gentlemen, thank you for today. So listen, I'll just sort of kick this off really as just talking about where we are, and I think we all appreciate that the industry, you know, is going to face with huge challenges in relation to sort of sustainability and climate change. And you know, we have a broad range of panelists here for a particular reason, of the different sort of viewpoints that we can gain. So I'd just like to sort of open up the conversation, if I can, really. General broad terms, very, very generally at the open, really, of just for you, from your particular viewpoint of where you sit in the chain, in the industry, what you see the challenges are, and also what the opportunities are for us in this industry. So I'll go from as I can see you on the screen. So Mr. Bagley, I'm afraid that means you're going first. So challenges and opportunities as you see it, John, for, you know, trying to get this housing stock to be low carbon.
Yes, I kind of knew I'd be going first. I'm not sure why, but yeah, okay. I'll start with the challenges first. Probably typically me being negative first. I think in the valuation space, it's about how do we, in its simple terms, how do we value property going forward for an issue we know about. We know it's coming around the corner. We know there's a big need to drive to be a more energy efficient housing stock, but is the market reflecting that yet? That's the big sort of $69 million question, really. Is the market reflecting a premium or a discount for either its greenness or its brownness? And if you accept there is or there isn't a difference in value, on what basis are you then starting to base your opinion of value on? So by that, I mean, we know the EPC has its limitations. We know there are some concerns about its accuracy, its reliability. You know, do you actually move towards relying on the EPC as the kind of blunt instrument for assessing whether the property is particularly green or particularly brown? And then are you then actually moving to a situation where you're making the market, or are you reflecting the market? As valuers, we're used to, you know, historically we say we don't make the market, we reflect what the market's doing. But actually the question for us as valuer, as the valuating profession, is, well, if we know that, I think about legacy housing stock here, you know, if there are some sort of real big big financial sticks coming down the tracks from fiscal policy from government, then in the sort of very short term ownership of a property, that's going to start to impact on people's affordability and people's occupation. So therefore, shutters valuers start to be reflecting that in value, whereas the market might not be actually reflecting that in market value now. Question is, from a purely valuation question here, is it market value anymore? But we'll save that argument for another day. I think opportunities for the profession here is that, it also starts to showcase valuation in its true light, which is you are genuine experts in the built environment, and therefore you start to reflect the value of EPCs, if it is EPCs, or the greenness, brownness. There's opportunities there for products in how we start to value property going forward. And that's, is there actually a situation where there's more of a forward-looking valuation possibility, and what does that mean for the products we offer, for the mortgage valuations we do? It's not necessarily one big challenge. I think there's equal challenges as there are opportunities for us.
Okay. All right, thanks, John. Come back to some of those points in a minute, if I may. I'm going to flicker this point across to Clive, from a lender perspective, of how he sees the challenges ahead of us and any opportunities that are there.
Sure.
Clive?
Yeah. Thanks, Matt. I think the biggest challenge at the moment is that clearly it's a very small part of the mortgage market. I think it's fair enough to say that we don't get people knocking on our door saying, have you got any green mortgages available at the moment? Having said that, the direction of travel is clearly in that way, and obviously every time we switch on the news at the moment, there seems to be some incident somewhere happening in the world, and climate change is the blame for it. So as a large corporate organization, we have responsibilities in that direction, and I think the challenge that we have is designing products that sort of meet the customer's needs and also meet the needs of a green credentials. A lot of lenders have dipped their toe in the water at the moment, and I think they've been quite simple in their design. So shaving, a few basis points off a standard product if an EPC certificate showing A, B, or C can be shown. I think as lenders we can get more sophisticated, and I suppose the opportunities there will be that if we can design products that, once we've got the data, and as we all know, risk people are always looking at data before they'll give a tick in the box for a new product to be launched. And I think if we can get data that shows that if you do buy an EPC A, B, or C rated house, it reduces your outgoings because you're spending less on fuel and you're being more efficient, then possibly in the future there might be ways of helping customers to borrow more. I think we're a way off that at the moment, but I think that is an opportunity in the future. And I think we all need to work together and as an industry to make these opportunities come to life, because it always seems to me that everyone's waiting for somebody else to make the first step. So I think that's where we are at the moment.
I'll pose a question now which I don't want the answer to, Clive, because I'll obviously go around Kieran and Adrian, but just something to think about at the moment for everybody, which we'll come back to, is that talking about products for consumers and what the consumer wants, is this the consumer driving this, or is this the regulation driving this? So, to put it bluntly, does the vast majority of our consumers care? So pause on that one. Kieran.
Thanks, Matthew. Oh, I've just seen the poll question come up.
Yes. So poll question out for everybody. Question 1: should lenders reflect the EPC rating in mortgage rates depending on the EPC rating? I don't know if that's written right, but yeah.
Why am I not allowed to vote, Matthew?
Because you're not, because you're on the panel, Adrian.
All right, okay.
Nor can I. Yeah. So sorry.
What are you commenting on?
We don't know why, really, but
you can work out a way on Zoom how to do it. Feel free.
No chance of that.
Challenges and opportunities as you see it.
Yeah, thanks, Matthew, and good afternoon, everybody. I think coming in from a slightly different perspective than John and Clive, In effect, we represent the house building industry, and my discipline is largely technical. And when someone says to me challenges, that encompasses a lot of things. Sorry, I've got the EPC screen up again there. That encompasses a lot of things when it comes to green building stock. My take on the question you just asked there, Matthew, is it regulation driving this? In my opinion, it absolutely is driving that. But equally, I think within that space, there is potentially an opportunity to create unique selling points for home builders and for consumers as well. Products or houses that are stronger on green credentials are likely to be, based upon market research, actually more likely to be aspired and required by consumers in this day and age as well. But just jumping back to challenges, I mean, if you look immediately at the challenge in front of us, we've got an uplift to Part L of the building regs coming into force next June, which is a 31% reduction in overall emissions from new properties as of June 2022 next year. 3 years later, that's going to reduce down to 75% reduction on emissions from where we are today, right? So that in itself brings massive challenges. It brings challenges in terms of specifications. It brings challenges in terms of the supply chain that comes with it, be it insulations, material fabrics, photovoltaic solar panel roofs, heat pumps, or alternative forms of space and water heating as well. And the big challenge around that is are those markets ready? Because our industry will rely extremely heavily in a very, very accelerated timescale on these industries to maybe able to upscale to get to where they need to. If you look at the statistics for heat pumps alone, 2019, 9,000 heat pumps were manufactured in all sectors as a primary means of heating and energy. Now we're talking about 300,000 new homes a year needing a heat pump potentially by 2025. So that's an exponential rise in a very short space of time. Add to that the complexity of the skills piece as well. If you look at the number of heat engineers that are out there to fit heat pumps, and I'm purely focusing on heat pumps right now, but obviously it's a much broader issue than this. We've got to upskill a lot of people in a very short space of time to actually even meet this demand in the marketplace as well. But that being said, in terms of opportunities, there's plenty of opportunities out there for innovation. There's plenty of opportunities out there to start looking at your building fabric now, because there's a bit of a misnomer out in the marketplace at the moment that as of June 2022, every house needs a heat pump, and that's simply not true. We are waiting for a lot of clarity from government on fabric energy efficiency standards, as well as clarity on overheating as well. But it doesn't necessarily mean that all houses from June 22 will be heat pumps. It's about looking for innovation in your building fabric, your specification, alternative methods, manipulating your SAP so you're complying with requirements as well. So there are opportunities out there. There's opportunities to look at building typologies, building types, footprints, etc. There's certainly opportunities from a marketing perspective as well to actually market your brand as being a very green brand as well, because what we've seen, as I alluded to earlier, is consumer demands in certain sectors of the market at the moment is actually one of the driving criteria for a purchase of a new house is actually the green credentials of the company and also the house as well. And I think we're seeing that more and more in the marketplace at the moment, which is definitely a positive thing. It's probably not one of the driving factors in all sort of sectors of your consumer or all niches of your consumer, but it's certainly a factor that comes into thinking at the moment as well in a house purchase.
It's I suppose just to pause to reflect, Kieran, on what the poll has come back and said about should mortgage rates reflect the EPC rating. Now 56% say yes, 44% say no. I'm going to take the general assumption that Adrian would have voted yes if he could have done. Nothing to specifically orientated towards the EPC rating of new build houses, Barratt houses, but nothing to do with that. But yeah, it is. Thank you for your view on that, Kieran. Again, I'll come back to a couple more points, but also it's interesting that we've got some chat and some Q&A happening, so that's good. But I'll give Adrian his 5 minutes first, if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. So I think just to give it some context, if you look at our sort of broad priorities as a PLC house builder, it's clearly to help meet the structural undersupply of homes, delivering the government's target of, or helping to deliver the government's target of 300,000 units, if that's what it still is. And there's a bit that says we just do what one of our many and various housing ministers say, which is do more quicker. But I think in delivering more numbers as we come out of the pandemic, clearly quality is hugely important. We have the Ombudsman coming up, which is another challenge and opportunity for us next year, just because it's a device to help us drive improvements in customer service and customer satisfaction, which is really important. Interestingly, and this has sort of come up on the rails as a main board PLC priority, and Matthew, you will really pleased to hear that our aspiration is actually to be the leading national sustainable house builder, not home builder. So I don't know whether that's a typo, but I lost confidence in that for a minute and I had to check it. So we are aim to be the leading sustainable house builder. And I think from a personal point of view, that's reflected in my priorities. So I've just got 3 priorities for this year. One, which is leveraging technology to overlay the mortgage process on our sales and marketing journey. And I think that applies to the valuation process in terms of EPCs, in terms of possibility of remote valuation, in terms of sharing data with the industry, which we think will be really important. Looking forward to a post Help to Buy market. How do we replace the benefit that Help to Buy gives us in terms of allowing our customers to buy our product with a 5% deposit? And actually, sustainability sits all the way across pretty much everything. And for somebody that probably didn't know what an air source heat pump was 18 months ago, it's a pretty significant challenge for me to say, well, how do we work with the broader industry in order to drive a sustainability agenda? And I would frame the challenge as as much of anything as one of language. Kieran's touched on some stuff there that if he wanted to, and I'm probably quite grateful that he didn't, could go into in exponentially more detail. And the trouble is, I think with a lot of people in lenders and probably even surveyors, you can lose them in the language and the detail. And when you overlay that on the customer really genuinely doesn't know what we're talking about when we use some of this language. So it's how we collaborate and engage in order to drive a better, more sustainable, in every sense of the word, proposition for our customers to be able to overlay that on the mortgage process. And by doing so, actually, that's a commercial opportunity for us, I think, as Kieran referred to be able to say, well, actually, there's now a growing diversity between a new build property, which is almost without exception A or B, and will continue to improve, set against the capital cost of upgrading a second-hand property to modern day standards. And to Clive's point, I think it is beholden on somebody to kick it off. And I think we're looking to lead the conversation by demonstrating what those numbers look like, and therefore lead the conversation in a language that everybody can understand and therefore collaborate for the benefit of our mutual customers.
There's thank you, Adrian. Thank you for that. There's a couple of things I want to explore before I go into some of the Q&As, because some very relevant question and answers coming in here. Is that do you as a collective think that the sort of the government targets here that we've got for low carbon are, from a housing perspective, one, achievable? And is it that and secondly, is it the consumer that is ahead of what we as an industry potentially, or the government as the sole regulator here, are they ahead in their thought process? So are they ahead of where the government is, and the government's trying to catch up, or is it the other way around? So, John, do you want to sort of pick either or? You can pick either question.
Yeah, is it achievable? Yes, it is, but it depends who's paying for it. In the legacy housing stock, in truth,
getting to
you're. I think the other sort of part of this. I was involved in the Green Deal, and it sort of always suspected whether people would do the work in the Green Deal, and rather than actually save money, they just walk around with shorts and t-shirt rather than jumpers and coats. And I just sort of wonder whether exactly what's the average consumer wanting to do in terms of energy efficiency. And if somebody said to you, you know what, you've got to go and put a whole load of external wall insulation on a lovely stone mill property in a Yorkshire village, then it's not going to happen. And and I think that one of the challenges you're going to have, A, you've already mentioned, is it who's going to pay for it? But B, actually, is there a real demand for it? Is that the driver for the house buying decision, or actually is it the fact you get into the best school in the town that you're in and so many other facets here? But I think basically it comes down to pound, shilling and pence in many respects for the legacy housing stock. Is how actually do you fund such a fundamental shift in home improvement?
Kieran, I suppose from a home builders federation, you know, so I suppose it's a little bit what Adrian said. Really, you know, you're focused on the new stock, which by association should be, you know, the more low carbon situation. But how do you think you can help with the existing stock?
It's a tricky question, that, to be honest. You know, our industry is very much looking forward in terms of, you know, its production lines and what's coming forward down the track. I suppose probably the obvious way is by trialing technologies and innovation and pilot sites that actually, you know, look at embracing not just bolt-on technologies as a retrofit, but actually, you know, in terms of the insulation, the cladding, the building construction, the fabric of the building itself. I mean, it's slightly tricky to answer because it, you know, as an industry, we create the housing stock in 2 years' time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then you're looking backwards. So actually, what we're doing now and what we're planning for and designing for now as an industry in 2 years, 3 years' time will be the housing stock of the UK already as well. Which, you know, to answer the first question, and apologies, I'm jumping around a little bit, but the first question is, you know, are these challenges achievable? Yes, they are. They absolutely are. I think John's point is absolutely bang on with the fact that who's paying for it. I mean, we as an industry are aware we're going to be paying for these uplifts to Part L and F, etc., and the Future Home Standard coming down the track as well. We know that. At the moment, we have a cumulative impact of regulatory change which is coming down the track, and that is getting higher and higher. And we've not even talked about the building safety bill, cladding and fire yet, and probably let's not go there today. But I think John would be quite relieved by that as well. But you know, there is this cumulative impact, and you know, we are seeing that already in build cost and specification change through to a number of tweaks to building regulations, you know, electric vehicle charging points, that sort of thing as well. But how we help the housing stock as we stand today, I'm not, Adrian, you may be able to answer this better than I, but I'm not sure we can do a lot in that space other than innovate and pilot sites now and demonstrate user-friendly technologies that work in new build environments that, you know, consumers can understand and operate.
Adrian?
So I'll try and answer lots of questions in one. Firstly, your question, do consumers care that much at the moment? Probably not, I think is the answer. And why don't I? I think the thing that will ultimately influence customer behaviour in the second-hand market, i.e. I am prepared to take out a £30,000 further advance in order to do whatever is required to my property to upgrade it, will be evidence that it actually is reflected in the value of the property. And the easiest place to start that is new build, because it's demonstrable much more easily than it is in a very, very diverse second-hand stock with nobody there to pull it together anyway. Yeah. So by demonstrating that, you know, what I described earlier about the energy efficiencies of new homes against the capital costs, then if you then, in answer to the questions that I wasn't allowed to answer, so I'm going to answer now, which was clearly yes, why would you ask? Is that, you know, if we are genuinely getting a premium, so a slightly different new build premium than the one that might be defined in the Red Book, that is based on sustainability, improved energy efficiency that stays with the property well after levels of discounts and incentives have disappeared, then that begins to drive behaviour. If that's then reflected in affordability assessments with lenders, then every single time a mortgage advisor speaks to a customer in answer to the question, if you reflect on what the question is that a customer would ask of a mortgage advisor, it would be, how much can I borrow and what's it going to cost me? Well, if the answer to that is, I need to know what the EPC rating of your property is, then that it changes from being like a green mortgage on the shelf that's gathering dust that nobody ever bothers asking for, to something that's totally intrinsic to the mortgage process. And I think in all these things there's a tipping point of customer perception and behaviour. And I think once we start to get to that point where it becomes a part of their mortgage application, it becomes a part of their consideration as to how much they can borrow and what it's going to afford, then that starts to influence people in the second-hand market as well. So directly, I would agree with Kieran that I think there's very little we can do, but I think by our behaviours, from what we do from here on in, together as an industry, that begins to affect people's behaviour, because it's worth their while considering it.
I'm going to put Clive on the spot now, really, because in terms of what Adrian has said as well, from a lender perspective, can you see that being a direction of travel you would consider in terms of how you're underwriting and what you're able to lend people?
I think as I mentioned in the opening statement, I think obviously, the market is moving in that direction. Clearly, at the moment, it's not something that is on the pad to do. But you asked the question, is government ahead of the public, or are public, ahead of the government? I think the government are looking at future voters, if I'm honest, and people who, generally speaking, have got more greener credentials tend to be the younger generation who will be future home buyers. And we're all sitting around here saying it's not currently an issue, but it might well be in 10 years' time. And I think this is what we need to plan for. And the question of who pays for it, we all know actually the customer pays for it ultimately. And at the moment, the costs are somewhat prohibitive. I mean, if I would assume to put heat pumps into houses is more expensive than putting a gas boiler in at the moment. Are people prepared to pay for these things to show their green credentials? I think everybody who has a conscience is green in the back of their mind. But if we're turning around and saying, well, these houses are going to cost you 20% more than one that isn't green, people might suddenly lose their green credentials. And I think that's the challenge we've got as an industry moving forward. I think. I would say this because I'm a lender, but lenders have started leading the way by offering cashbacks and lower rates to low EPC rated properties. But are house builders building them at a reasonable cost to encourage people to buy them? I can't answer that question, but
no, that's fair enough. Listen, panelists, I just sort of refer to the poll that's closed, and then. We've got a load of question and answers, which I'd like to quickly go through. So the question was, for the second poll, should valuers reflect the EPC rating in value depending on the EPC rating? Overwhelming 71% said yes, and 29% said no. So so there's an interesting development. John, do you want a quick comment?
I think the next one will give us a better holistic view here. I think isn't
it the same question?
kind of. Should values in isolation reflect the EP?
Yeah,
that's great, isn't it? But actually, is the buying public?
Yeah,
prepared to pay more. And I think the two questions really have to go hand in hand.
While we wait for the results on this one, we got a number of questions in, please. So just first one here from Christopher Yarrow is the initial outlay. The initial outlay is not cost effective in terms of payback. So how do we get around this? Kieran, do you want to take that one? Sorry to put you on the spot.
That's okay. I mean, in terms of the initial outlay, it'd be good to sort of quantify what's meant there. I mean, are we talking about the build cost? Are we talking about the cost of heat pumps, fabric improvement?
It could be anything really. The cost of sort of heat pumps. Put one in. Are you ever going to see the return on it?
As a consumer, obviously it's a different journey to a developer, isn't it? I mean, as a developer, you are to a certain extent going to be relying on revenues to cover off your build cost in certain instances. Someone just a moment ago raised the issue about the extra overcost from a gas boiler to a heat pump. What's at the moment probably £2,000 for a boiler is probably going to be £3,500–4,000 for a heat pump. So yeah, there's a 2K uplift, hypothetically in that scenario. I think revenues will cover it. I think margins will possibly be affected in some instances as well. But it's a difficult one to answer. And it's all about economy of scale. If you look at heat pumps, as I said earlier, until that market really gets motoring, you are not going to see those costs come down. And until that point, your build cost is going to be inflated.
Fair point. One for you, Clive. This is from Peter Gregg. Do you think it's equitable to provide a cheaper mortgage for a property with EPC rating C, but potential to achieve an A with the customer not looking to enhance, than you provide for a property possible? Anyway, I suppose the general consensus of the point here is that do you think it's equitable? There should be cheaper mortgages available for lower EPC ratings.
I think that goes back to an earlier point about, is this customer led or is this regulation led? And I think at the moment, the fact that it's sort of regulation led will probably answer that question really, in a sense that, that's what we're sort of required to provide, if you like. So It's not my point, so whether it's equitable or not, but I just think this is basically what's happening.
Let's go.
Can I jump in there? So I mean, I think it's not the broader question. Is it not the right thing for us to do collaboratively as an industry to influence consumer choice to buy more energy efficient homes? And if that's the case, then the answer to the question is absolutely, it is equitable because it's the right thing to do. And that's absolutely what regulation, because what will ultimately change this probably is big capital. It's BlackRock writing to CEOs, it's Legal & General, saying they're not investing in businesses without a demonstrably effective sustainability policy. So, I think we shouldn't forget, without wishing to preach about anything, because I'm certainly not necessarily one to do that. But this is the right thing to do, isn't it? In which case the answer is yes.
So here's one of the dangers, and here's one of the questions further on. I'll come back to a couple of other, but one from Alan Milstein. How can we compare new build and existing stock? Don't we risk creating a two-tier market? More than 50% of our homes being more than 50 years old, those buying older homes being significantly disadvantaged with obviously a lower EPC rating. So
I think the point from Adrian there plays in very much, which is it the right thing to do? Yes, it is, but it's the delivery of that, and to make sure that you don't create a two-tier market. Maybe a broad brush statement, but the older housing stock even is often occupied by the lower income part of the UK. So how do you deliver that aspiration and not leave society behind at the same time? I think that's the greatest challenge, but that's for policy to think about, isn't it?
And interesting, the poll results have just finished there. So do you think that the house buying public will pay more for a more energy efficient property? So 60% say yes, 40% say no.
So we've got a situation where valuers should take into account EPC 71%, but only 60% are prepared to pay more for the property. So that's kind of the problem, isn't it?
Yeah. Clive, I want to ask you this question because it's come from Jaden, but so Jaden's asking, if A to C rated properties attract a premium and lower rated properties attract discount in low carbon future, does this not hit the hardest for those who can least afford it? Higher propensity to own cheaper, poor housing quality without the cash to do the necessary improvements if they're needed. And I think that is a consideration to think through, isn't it?
I think it's the chief risk of this, isn't it? As you would, Jaden, very well articulated, and it is a risk. But that's why having a discussion is so important. I don't think, in terms of where we are on sustainability, we claim to have all the answers. And clearly there's a commercial benefit to us in driving, acknowledging the energy efficiency of A and B rated properties over others. Of course there is, but I don't think that necessarily means that we're blind to the challenges for the broader housing market. And two-tier systems generally only work for a limited period of time, and therefore arguably aren't in our interest in the long term to create that. So this sort of forum and anything else that comes out of it moving forward in terms of the dialogue about how we implement, to John's point, and how we make it work, I just think is absolutely crucial, because just because it's difficult doesn't mean we shouldn't be talking about it.
There is a lot of questions around specific things like solar panels and heat pumps and the advantages and disadvantages of them. Forgive me, attendees have asked those questions, but I'm more going to sort of focus on some of the broader specific questions that we've had put in, if that's okay. And a question here is that around sort of traditional building methods, really. So here's one maybe for Kieran. Why do we continue to use traditional building methods when modern methods can deliver homes that are lower carbon?
Simple answer: scale and cost. Look, I mean, most of our large builders have a proportion of MMC or volumetric construction within themselves. There are those that suggest that timber frame isn't modern method of construction, given it's been around since caveman days. But equally, in terms of the pre-manufactured or the prefabricated process, it is actually deemed as MMC. The big thing is cost and scale. It's all about your operation as a developer. if everything works in a utopian perfect world, MMC is perfect because you can, effectively crane things or design things off site, build them in a nice dry factory rather than a wet green field, and you can manage your quality control, and it's perfect. It comes to site, it's craned in, and everything works really well. And then your follow-on trades, your bricklayers, your roofers, etc., they just sequentially follow in behind it. In reality, as we are seeing right now, we've got material shortages which are very acute in certain materials. We've got labour issues, particularly bricklayers, particularly scaffolders and roof layers. We've got issues with aggregates for ground workers, etc. as well. So MMC, there's definitely a part to play. And I think if we are going to get anywhere near both the Future Homes Standard and also the 300,000 homes per year target, I expect to see a lot more uptake on MMC. But I think it is prohibitive in certain instances to actually, own a factory. And let's be honest, what we're building is not a small product. It requires a large factory and production line to be able to do it, which means a capital outlay, which means that return on capital employed has to be efficient. So, there's definitely pros to it. As the HBF, we're definitely pro MMC, but it's a very big outlay. You're seeing, large players, large PLC developers doing MMC. You're seeing some into the middle-sized capital, and also SMEs are looking at MMC and undertaking MMC at the moment. It's great. Do I see an upward trajectory towards more MMC as we get towards 2030, 2050? Yeah, I absolutely do. But those costs will still be there.
Is there also a potential problem with lenders and valuers and with MMC as well, in not necessarily taking them on for mortgage or to value?
I mean, I'm probably not best placed to answer that one, am I?
No, I'm sorry, it wasn't meant for you, Kieran.
Please do. It's fine, Kieran. I think from a valuation perspective, there's a few factors, isn't there? Which is, it's the longevity, it's the confidence, it's the trust, it's the warranties around it, it's what happens if it goes wrong. Is the market. We go back to the market points. Our buyers generally wanting to buy a property of an untried, untested technology. That said, MMC construction has been around for quite a long time now. So you get to the point where you start to have that data, don't you? Which is, it's not quite the unknown that it used to be. I think one of the biggest challenges is around the warranties and confidence that's been put together correctly on site. They're built fantastically well in the factory to fantastically close sort of 1 mil tolerances, but what happens on site, how they actually being assembled together, it's kind of all those factors together which makes it a little bit of a question mark from the valuation and from the market, I'd say.
Clive, I don't want to put you on spot, particular sort of your own society sort of lending policy, but in general, really.
In general
yeah.
terms, I mean, I suppose I'm quite surprised at the how few modular properties are coming through to be mortgaged at the moment. I think a few years ago, I visited the LNG factory, and I've been down to see Volker Fitzpatrick down in Harpenden, and I was anticipating quite a big increase because we're happy to lend on them as long as they have the BOPAS accreditation, and for all the reasons that the panel said, I thought they would be adopted by the house builders. What we've seen is sort of the SME builders, so we see fairly small developments with 10, 15 units, generally city centres, quite a lot of housing associations using them. I think I got the first site with 132 units come in last week, which was quite a shock. Never seen anything quite that size. So maybe it is starting to take a hold on the market now. I hope so, because I think it could solve a lot of our problems that we have in the house building sector. But then it probably create a load as well. So.
Yeah, that's right. It's Kieran's visitor distracted me. Good for you, Kieran. Quite right. Thanks, Clive. Just had a question in. Just a question in from one of these, which is a very apt question in terms of, other than the regulatory part, what role does the government have in helping to lower the carbon emissions of the housing stock? And does it want to? This is my further question. Does it want to, or is it going to push it onto the housing industry to take care of that? So 2 elements. Adrian, do you want to have a stab at that one?
Not desperately, to be honest with you, Matthew, but I'll give it a go. I'll give it a go as you've asked me. So, what's the role of government? Well, I think it's an obligation on government having set it. So, if it's going to meet its own sustainability targets, then forgive me, Kieran probably knows the numbers better, but housing stock accounts for a significant percentage of carbon emissions, and it has to find a way to do it, and it's going to be a mixture of carrot and stick. At some point. So I don't think the sticks necessarily arrived yet, but that could be through taxation policy in terms of purchase of whatever EPC banding they might choose. But yeah, I think it's an inevitability. If they're going to meet their own targets, then they have to drive outcomes, because I'm not sure the industry by itself or consumer behavior will just drift to a natural pace where it adapts. I think it requires that.
Anyone got a different view to that? Carrot and stick. I think it was a good analogy.
I think it will be the stick. Sorry, that will drive behaviour. I think that will be the game changer.
I think you're right. I wouldn't disagree with anything that's been said there. I mean, obviously, let's not forget that the government's carbon targets and green targets have been enshrined in law now. So actually, they have to deliver on these, and I think that's where the stick will come in, because they have to perform against these as it's statute.
And can I come back to I suppose a point we started to explore really, which was this potential that we've got of a sort of a separation of the markets here, where we've got people that are living in poorer rated EPC properties that know what they need to do to improve the EPC, clearly can't afford to do that. So therefore, they're going to get to the situation where we've experienced it time and time again, where the media will brand this mortgage prisoners, where we've created, without a full intention of doing so, potentially where people are stuck in properties where they can't afford to improve them, so therefore they can't sell them because the market is moving in a different direction. And what can we do to help? I think too many times we've come across in our industry over the last 10, 15 years of creating some situations without the intention of doing so. So, what can we do to help those people now?
I can start if you like. I think some lenders have already moved towards offering deals on further advances to help people in existing properties improve their EPC rating, and I think we'll see a lot of that as we get closer to the sort of the deadline where we've got to reduce our average EPC rating down. But I think it will take government involvement here, a bit like we've all got to move to electric cars and we're all driving around in gas guzzlers at the moment. The same scenario will happen, won't it? If we haven't all bought electric cars and we're insisting on holding on to our diesels, the government's going to have to offer some sort of a scrappage fee. I think they've done it before, haven't they? But I'm not saying we'll be scrapping houses, but I'm saying some sort of financial incentive to help people move their properties into a lower banding.
They've not tried this before, but it's sort of failed with the government.
I think, you're right, they have. But I just think that it's becoming more urgent, isn't it? I mean, as I mentioned before, virtually daily now we're seeing, the climate changing, and at the moment everybody's obviously concerned about coronavirus, but I mean, if you talk to people what is the biggest threat to the human race, it isn't coronavirus, it's climate change. Mm-hmm. So as soon as we sort of all wake up to that, we'll realize that we've all got to do something about it.
I think this, you can probably dissect the question into sort of several ways, can't you? It's in the world where there's affordability to improve the property, then there's an ability to do so. It's the part of the market where there's not an affordability to do that. How do you not have unforeseen circumstances which creates that sort of dreadful mortgage prisoner? And there are some parallels with the cladding piece. I know trying to avoid mentioning cladding, but you say let's build something better now, so you do, that's fantastic. So your new build is perfect.
Mm.
Then you've got an existing stock which isn't quite the same standard. So how do you do with that legacy stock? And unfortunately, the market can't necessarily be the bit that picks up the tab. So there's going to have to be some kind of government funding here to be able to do that.
Yeah,
I don't think there's any two ways about it.
Adrian?
I think that, I mean, you'll forgive me, Clive, for objecting to the car house comparison, which always makes me nervous. You know, driving cars off showroom floors and dropping prices and all that. So it's never very keen on that. And I don't think it's true in this circumstance either, because, you know, there's a massive difference. I get the comparisons, but there's a massive difference between scrapping somebody's car and scrapping their home. It's just,
yeah.
It is the ultimate expression of security for their family and their aspirations, and to create a market, whether intentionally or not, that is this two-speed market. Can't be an outcome for it, but these things always break down to either it's either comes from industry. So I'm not sure what industry would pay for it. Therefore, I think it has to boil down to two things. One is government putting some money at it for people that genuinely can't afford it, rather than making it available to everybody. Not sure how that works. I think the other thing is process. So I mean, if you look at, I don't know, lagging your loft, I'm advised by somebody that knows well that when government did spend a lot of money on getting people to lag the lofts, then the principal objection was actually, I'm quite happy to pay £1,000 for somebody to put some insulation in my loft, but it's full of stuff and I can't be bothered to take it out. So actually, it's just thinking a little bit more laterally and innovatively about process and how you can help customers. And I think that, if you put your customer hat on in every single solution that you think of, how does it impact the customer? What, adversely, how can we overcome that? So if it's the right thing for the customer, then, and you can make it work for a majority of people, and I think people tend to act accordingly. But broadly, if it's not going to come from the private sector, it's got to come from government. And that's going to be the point, whether they're acknowledging it now or not, that they'd have to arrive at.
It's a big part of this education as well to the public and the house buying
I
chain. And we all play a part. And again, going to my new build, and it's different to legacy, but actually to explain to the client when they're buying, this is the consequence of having a slightly less green property.
Yeah.
So,
or from our point, the alternative to that, the opposite side of the coin, and part of what we're looking at is how do we better explain to our customers the benefit of buying a energy efficient property. So and it's a language thing again. How do you make it real for them? What's important to them? So I think we need to understand what customers are thinking before we decide what it is we're going to say to them. I think too often we probably decide what we think the benefits of our homes are and tell our customers, but actually what we need to understand is what motivates them, what's important to them, and how do we get that message across.
Is this inevitability time element? Back to what one of the sort of first questions was: is it are consumers ahead of us or ahead of regulation in their thought process, or is it the other way around? Is this something that is just going to build and build and build, like the rolling perpetual sort of snowball, that consumers, if they don't understand now, in a year's time they are, in 2 years' time they're going to, and when you reach that cliff edge where you're having to do something, people will actually put supposedly the money where it needs to be.
Personally, I think there is a degree of snowballing, and I think there will be a point where we reach that cliff edge. But I think government are definitely driving this at the moment. We've seen in the electric vehicle sector or industry, again to do the comparison of car to houses, we've seen a lot of positive press around electric vehicle charging points and electric vehicles generally. We haven't seen that with heat pumps and with modern methods of construction and new energy efficiency measures yet. And I do genuinely believe there's a lack of understanding in the industry about what a heat pump is and how it affects your heating, how it will replace gas, how gas is being replaced. Because these headlines, these titles have been thrown out in political press and in the House as well. But I'm not sure Joe Public does understand this at all. And I think there's a lot of work to be done there in terms of campaign work to really take the public with us on this journey. So they understand what they're buying, as someone alluded to earlier.
I think it's also quite a staggering fact, isn't it? The percentage of emissions from the built environment, which we kind of focus on cars and planes, whereas the actual reality is what we're sat in here makes such a difference to the real life climate challenges we're seeing more and more. So I think that snowball will get bigger and very quickly, in my view.
A few more questions come through, if you don't mind. Panel linked around obviously government proposals for lenders and their efficiency books, built around what's your thoughts around grade 1 and 2 listed buildings? Think government review the rules around those to be able to sort of change them. And then a comment from Mr. Stevens for you, John, right at the end here, which says he came on here to avoid the terminology of cladding for at least an hour. But he makes a point which probably sums up some of the other questions that we've had and not had time to sort of get to and specifically individually answer. He's putting here that the government needs to create the carrot and stick, which Adrian's talked about, as the financials don't currently add up, I think, which we talked about for the last hour, really. And the pressure will come through either direct-to-consumer legislation or via lender targets. And I think he does make a very moot point here. And I think we have all talked about coming from both sides here. But anybody want to make a comment in terms of Mr. Stevens, whether we... Mr. Stevens, for those that don't know, Rob Stevens is of the Nationwide Building Society, who has been a regular panelist on our previous webinars. So thank you for joining us, Rob. John, do you want to pick him up on there?
Firstly, cladding, apologies for that. I thought I'd get it in there. I think, you're right. Absolutely. The regulatory changes are going to come, the financial pressures are going to come, and that's going to change. That's going to change the market, and that will change behaviour. But it gets back to it will change behaviour where there's affordability and where there's not affordability. That's a massive challenge for the market. But a big chunk of this has to be the education starts about what you can do to the property, and also the heat pumps. Most people probably never heard of it up until 12 months ago. So there's a confidence in the technology as well to say, well, I've had 30 years of a gas boiler and it works. As a consumer, I don't really expect to change my boiler. I think when we talk about the analogy with the car here, I expect to change my car. I expect it to fall apart at some point. I can kind of choose when I want to replace my roof on a house. I'll keep patching it up. Whereas what's going to come down the tracks is I'm going to have to do something that probably doesn't need to be changed. And I think that's the big consumer sort of behaviour messaging, which is going to be a difficult one. And I think Rob's right. The government policy will drive this, and there's going to have to some kind of fiscal policy to drive that behaviour. Will follow at the same time.
Anyone else? Anyone else want to comment?
Wouldn't dare to disagree with Mr. Stevens. So happy with that.
We asked all the questions of the poll. Yeah,
we have. I've remembered this time around. So
I'm just conscious of time that we've got to.
Oh no, there's another one. There we go. I haven't remembered this time round.
That was a subtle hint, John.
I completely missed it. It's okay.
So, for our attendees, their last question is out. Who do you think should fund retrospectively required energy efficient measures? So I think that would be a good, interesting conclusion probably to some of our conversations. But gents, we've just got a couple of minutes left really before the end. There's some general chat on the chat if you want to look into that. So I said apologies that I haven't been able to get to everybody's questions. I suppose one to finish on here, and again comes from Rob again, so he's got into the thick of it. Does the panel think that the CBES will be the catalyst for change? Kieran, apparently Adrian told me that you're the most technically competent person on this panel, so is that a question you want to...
I set the bar pretty low, to be fair, Kieran, but I think it's true.
Well, this is getting really funny. Can you remind me what CBES, please?
No, I was hoping you would know.
But this is the point about language, isn't it? Because I've no idea.
No.
I didn't know last year what ESG stood for. I didn't know what a ground source heat pump. So this is moving so quickly. So at the risk of sort of, barging Rob's question out of the way, you know, there is a thing about people sitting around the table pretending they know more than they do. So well done, Kieran, because I would have admitted to that, but I wouldn't have expected you to. But I just think there's a really serious issue about you know, translating this into language that people that can influence and help will be able to do so. So yeah, I think it's a really good point that we don't understand the question.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point that Rob has highlighted as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Things that certain people are interested in, others aren't.
Yeah.
And I think the analogy we keep using here about the car situation, most people are interested in cars. I suppose, unless specifically what you do, are we interested in heat pumps or your boiler, or whether your roof is a specific type? I think it's probably the answer for them generally, for the most of us, is no, but we just want it to do the job it's supposed to do. You know, that's how I personally look at my car, but I know a lot of other people don't. So the poll for question 4 is now closed. About who do we think we should retrospectively for energy? Public is the answer is 3%. The government 24%. Mixture of both 74%. So I think that gives us an answer in terms of where we think that the money is going to come from. Okay, everybody. I suppose I'm just going to go around the panel just for final comments. We could probably go forever and ever. We could probably go down the specificness of specific things here that lots of people are interested in, and maybe we should go off at tangent and take another webinar for another day on specific areas that was generated from this call, because I'm you know, there is a lot of questions that we've not been able to specifically answer. So just final comments, really, guys, before we close, and I thank you. So, Kieran, any just final comments from you, if that's okay?
I think, you know, as we've seen today, that there's a lot of theories out there. There's a lot of confusing and conflicting information out there, which I think this is part of the danger at the moment. We are on the verge of, you know, the next 4 years for, you know, certainly for the new build housing industry are going to be transformational in what we do. What's happening at the moment will affect the way we design, build and occupy properties for the next 20, 25 years. We've seen it on tall buildings with cladding and fire. We're now seeing it in the energy criteria as well. And, you know, I think if one thing is jumping out at the moment is there is so much misinterpretation out in the marketplace for, you know, what we're going to be doing next year. Luckily, we're very close to government and we understand what's coming forward, but the messaging really needs to improve for the wider sector, you know, the lenders, the valuers, and the consumers. More importantly, you know, we are here to sell houses as a new build developer, and it's important the consumers, we take them with them.
Yeah, really good point, Kieran. Thank you. Clive?
Yeah, I'd agree that I think that ultimately this will be consumer led. I know obviously at the moment, you know, we're all sort of like looking at what the government is asking, but I do think that within a few years' time, people will be asking about their EPC ratings, and they will be asking about heat pumps. I think, you know, we've been very traditional in this country, the way we construct houses and construct mortgages for that matter. But when I visited Volker Fitzpatrick, who are a Dutch firm, they did tell me that 70% of the houses in Holland are made in that style design. So, you know, obviously we've got a long way to go. And apparently heat pumps have been around for 10 years. So they're not new. We've just been slow to adopt these things. But I do think the pressure will come from the customer. And you know, ultimately, it's them that call the shots. And you know, we're all commercial organisations. We want to supply their needs.
Correct. Yeah, very good point. John?
It's in the here and now, isn't it? It's coming down the tracks very, very quickly. I think we need to be, I think, collectively educating the public about what it means and what the consequences are. And I think as making sure we all understand the terminologies and the technologies and actually that it works and there's a future with a better housing stock. And but yeah, it's here and now. I think as a profession, and I think we need to be getting better at accepting new technologies as well. And that's because it will only become more to the fore as we get more challenges to meet really quite stringent energy efficient goals. But yeah.
Thanks, John. Thank you. And Adrian?
So I mean, I think I'm lucky enough to be able to chat to you guys and lenders and valuers generally for a living, which is tremendous. But I think if you wind back those conversations to when the market went wrong, whatever, over 10 years ago, it took a crisis to get the industries to engage properly together in order to find solutions to underpin transparency and all the issues we were facing at the time. And I think, unfortunately, you know, that sort of dialogue has faded away over a period of time. You know, this is not just a national, a global issue of enormous significance that applies to all of us and our families. And, you know, our industry, the house building and the home moving industry is central to providing some of the solutions. So, you know, I'd urge anybody listening to use this as an opportunity to engage with, whether it's your valuers or house builders or HBF, just in order to further the conversation, because it's a really important one.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you very much. Adrian, Kieran, Clive, John, thank you very much for your time
Pleasure.
today. Thank you to everybody who attended. Very lively debate, lots of questions we didn't get time to come through and answer, but I'm sure we will do in the future. And I think if we take anything from this today is that to keep carrying on the conversation, to talk about it. The more of us understand what's going on, the better for everybody. So thanks again, everybody. Have a good evening.
Cheers,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.